does a lot of things.
Okay, I'm Carrie Rodriguez. I'm the founder of Massachusetts Parents United, and I'm the newly elected president of the National Parents Union.
All right. Tiffany Payne here, mother of 5. Advocate, just always doing what we gotta do.
Awesome. All right, guys. So I came up with this concept, right, because I've been noticing in the disability space there isn't a lot of conversation of the cultural piece, and I also see that in the disability space it's not really diverse, right? And so I want us to have a conversation of what that really looks like and how disabilities affect people of color in marginalized communities, and I want us to have an open dialogue about that. So I know for me, as a founder of a nonprofit, I'm struggling with the lack of conversation in disabilities for children of color. And I feel like nobody really wants to tackle this conversation. And I also feel like it's put out to the world like disability is like a white problem. It's not a white problem, it's like everybody's problem. And I want to kind of talk about it. So I know that you have some educational background. You've worked in the public school sector, actually in the special education world, right? See, Edith? So can you talk to us about working in that space, and do you feel that parents like us understand how to navigate special education?
So first of all, I taught at the University of UMass Boston at the graduate level, and I did teacher training. So I trained special education teachers. Very little diversity in that area, which is problematic. The other piece is I did work as an administrator in Boston Public Schools, and I was a special ed teacher and also a special ed administrator. The problem is that with the disability world, it is primarily white, but more problematic is that there is a Eurocentric view of disability. So when it comes to Black and brown students, Black and brown community, we don't have the representation in the literature to a large degree, and if it's there, it's a footnote. The other piece is that those who drive this Eurocentric policy and practice of special ed are primarily white. So
Say it again.
really trying to get the lens of the cultural differences, the linguistic diversity that's so critical, because if you look at the population of students in urban districts particularly, especially Boston, it's primarily Black and brown children. And so we have a problem. We have a problem with lack of equity in services, we have a problem with lack of representation, lack of understanding of cultural differences, and so all of those issues impact communities of color in terms of how we can access services, but more importantly, be knowledgeable about how to navigate the system. And a system that is primarily developed, designed, and decoded for white privilege. And so racism and systems of supremacy and entitlement and privilege is a conversation we need to have, because our parents and particularly our students are not providing the services, the access, and the support that they need. So I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. I'm delighted to be here.
And when our kids aren't served, the consequences are so dire. Like we're always talking about, like if our kids are underserved, whether it's in special ed or just general ed, it's poverty, it's incarceration, it's death. That we end up with the consequences.
And a lot of statistics show that a lot of our kids that are the school to prison pipeline are kids with IEPs. They're special education kids, right? And so that's a big issue. So I know you've been very vocal about the disciplining methods that a lot of these school systems use and how they approach our children with unique challenges. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I gotta say, I love this space because, I gotta be honest, like it's very emotional for me to be sitting here right now at the end of this table, because that's why I started my organization.
That's right.
Because I was a mom sitting at the end of the table like this at an IEP meeting, and there were educators all around who were fed up with my child in kindergarten.
In kindergarten.
And my child had an IEP, and even though, you know, I had been a political organizer my whole life, I had worked in union organizing, I thought, you know, my whole life was devoted to helping other people advocate, and I sat at the end of that table, and I had failed him. I felt like I had failed him. I felt like I had put him in a situation where he was just being traumatized every single day. They had given up on him. I had no power. I had no voice. And things started to click for me. You know, they really did. This was, you know, Matthew is not a bad boy. You know, he is an autistic little boy who is very special and very bright and very artistic. He's the best kid in the world to me. And I wasn't willing to give up. And I had a lot of catching up to do. It's a whole new language you have to learn as a special needs mom. The language and the attitude that people come at you when you're sitting at the end of that IEP table, it's intentionally exclusive. Kids like mine, you know, are deemed to be aggressive and, you know, disobedient, and, you know, sent into the principal's office and sent home and sent into redirect rooms that look like prison cells, instead of being, you know, viewed as being high-spirited, you know, and full of energy, and, you know, he needs some extra help or he needs some extra support. And so this work is very personal to me. It's why, you know, I don't care what kind of mud gets thrown at me. Like, I'm here for that kid.
That's right.
And I'm never going to be by myself at the end of that table.
That's
And
right.
I don't want any other mama to be at the end of that table.
Exactly.
Because it broke my heart. And we got to fight for our kids. And
Absolutely. It's true. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I was at that same table as well. You know, dealing with, at the time, I had a double sword at me. You know, I was dealing with homelessness, literally in a shelter, hotel style with my 3 kids at the time. And dealing with the fact that one of my daughter on the autism spectrum was having these difficulties in school, placing her through, you know, Head Start, through regular preschool, through a private preschool. They were shuffling her around. They didn't know. I didn't have no idea. I'm trying to get over the fact that I didn't have a house, a roof over my head, let alone my child having a disability that I had no idea what to go through, how to navigate. But, you know, at that time, I had to quit my job, which I was working at a prestigious hospital here in Boston, where I got fired from. That's another conversation for another day. But dealing with that, having no job, having to depend on assistance, and trying to deal and navigate a whole new other system of disability, I had no clue. But I had to rise above, and I had to work myself, reading pamphlets, reading books, getting through online sources, and just trying to advocate for myself to know how to advocate for her, because no one else is going to do it. You know, you're gonna sit there at the table, you're gonna cry, and they're just gonna look at you, and they're gonna just move you on to the next child that they gotta work on for their IEP. And you're sitting there still confused. You know, at the end of the day. So I'm glad for these spaces, because I know that there's some adults and there's parents out there that are suffering, and I'm so sorry that you're suffering, but we have to rise above, and we're here right now so that we can help you out.
And so I just want to add one thing real quickly, because despite the fact that I was a university instructor, I was a special education administrator. When I was at an IEP parent meeting as a parent, because I've been on both sides, autism runs heavily in my family. I went into special ed because I had 2 brothers with autism who got no services. But when I was at an IEP team meeting as a parent, still you are not respected. So it doesn't matter if you, I knew the language. I was a team chairperson at one point, so I knew the whole process. It doesn't matter. So we have to have a conversation about racism, about these systemic structures that purposely and continuously disadvantage Black and brown students and their families, disrespect us, don't acknowledge what we bring to the table. And I want to say to all parents out there, that you are your child's expert. Don't ever let anyone tell you what your child needs. Listen to your gut. You know your child best. The schools have your children, if they're in school, 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
You have your child 18 hours plus the weekend, and you will have your child beyond graduation or whether they turn 22, which they're entitled to stay in special ed. So please, parents, make a list, do whatever you have to do. Bring a friend to the meeting. Make sure that this process works for you, and it's hard, and there are barriers for us that we have to break down. No one's gonna break it down for us, and it is emotional. And I know that I was not able to impact what I needed to get for my son. Even though I had all that knowledge, I was still seen based upon how I present as a person of color.
And I think what you're saying is so important, so if folks are listening and want to have big takeaways from this, like, don't walk into that meeting alone. That's one of the first things I learned. Do not walk into that meeting alone. Like, even if you don't have an expert, and now you're seeing that there's like a community of folks you can call on, you can get some advice, there are folks who are your peers, other mamas that will come in, who have been to war a couple of times and know, what, frankly, some of the tricks they're gonna pull on you. You just can't walk into that meeting alone. We have members of Massachusetts Parents United who have gotten trespassed out of buildings because IEP meetings
I've
gone
heard
bad.
those before.
Who literally just because of a lack of cultural competence or just not understanding, the racial dynamic in the room, where of course the mom is going to get upset. Of course the mom's going to cry or yell or be outraged or frustrated and all of those things. And because of the racism that exists, the lack of cultural competency, they're going to look at folks as angry black women or fired up Latinas who like are using their hands. Like right now, it's a struggle.
Exactly.
Here, so you got to let my baby. I'm like, let me tell you, and this is how you catch me trespass. So,
it's true.
but all of those things, like, it's understandable. Like there are communities that you can turn to for help, but takeaway number one: don't walk alone. You never have to take what they offer either.
Right.
I'd love to hear you talk more about that as an expert. Yeah. Like I'm not an education policy expert. I'm an expert.
You're an expert.
And I'm from this side of the table. But what I had to learn, and it was painful because I trusted folks. I trusted what they told me because I didn't know what my options were. They don't give you a menu saying like, here are all the things we could do. This is what we're suggesting. Does this sound right, or do you want to try something else? They don't hold that. They're going to go with a lot of the time, from my perspective, what is cheapest, what is easiest, what is most convenient for them. How they can warehouse your child. It's not necessarily. You can't always trust what you're first presented. So
It's true.
Like, unfortunately, like, that was a hard lesson I had to learn because, again, I thought, the redirect room, putting my kid in a cinder block cell to have sensory deprivation time.
To keep others safe.
Like that was safe. Or putting my kid in a hole. My kid is not violent or aggressive. He has a problem being deferred from a preferred activity. He has a problem.
Which is an autism trait.
Yeah, which is like, he's like classic, he has the classic trait. And we should also talk about how long it took to actually get him the diagnosis and get him the test.
There's so many elements. To me, so I love the way that we're talking about the table, right? Because every time I speak about IEP meetings, I call them mom sit-downs, right? Because if you guys notice, and it's like the setup is so real, right? They have you sitting here, right here, right in the middle. Everybody's on that side. There's like it's not a collective. So you walk into a meeting and there's already that divisive technique where the parent's sitting here alone with either their advocate or their supporter, and they're on that side. So it already comes off as we're going to protect us, our jobs, and you guys kind of figure this out.
And the chairperson thing, and I want to hear you talk about this. Like, some lady who does not know my child is going to be like the arbiter of what's there and what's going to happen. And like, it's been my experience even now, where like, well, I've never met your son, but like, this is what I'm doing.
So then how do you know how many hours or minutes my child needs services? I'm confused.
It's a very, very intimidating process. And
Very.
the advice that I would give to parents is, before you go into that meeting, make a list of your child's strengths.
Yes. Yes.
So you,
Yes.
you are your child's advocate. You know your child best. And if someone who did an assessment, who spent an hour or 2 hours with your child says, something that doesn't sound right, you have a right to say, well, excuse me, and look at your list and say, well, my child is able to do this in that area. And if you don't understand something, stop the process. You have a right to say, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to bring someone with you. But the other piece is that do not minimize the fact that you are the expert. You are the only expert at that table.
Yes.
Because you're
Yes.
the only one who knows your child best. And so whatever you say, you are the driver of the process. And
Yeah.
the process is not working for you. If it's not in the best interest of your child, then speak up. I'd like to just point out the behavior, because when it comes to Black and brown students, districts tend to respond to behavior with a consequence, not with a service. So if your child has some difficulty, for example, with reading, and he or she is acting out because they have difficulty with reading, which is the highest indicator that there's a problem, and your child is not getting services for that, and instead they want to put your child into a timeout because your child is acting out, find out what is the problem behind the behavior. Behavior is a symptom of something that is not working in the system on behalf of your child, because no child likes to be embarrassed by having a temper tantrum. A temper tantrum means I'm having a meltdown because this is not working for me. It is hurting. It is hurting me.
This is so right.
And so it's so critical to say, if your child, if the district causes your child, if the school causes your child to have a temper tantrum, you need to find out what the school is or is not doing that caused that temper tantrum. Because no child is going to act out and bring that kind of attention and demonstrate their misery, because a meltdown says, I'm miserable, I don't know what to do, my body aches, my brain aches, everything is burning inside of me. And it really sets them up as a target. Find out what's going on. What is a service that needs to be in place that is not in place, so that that child can function like every other child?
That is so important. And again, I'm thinking about my math, because even though we've built these organizations and we organize parents, I am in the struggle every single day.
Still all the time.
All the time, right?
It's a war.
So when they call me, I gotta give you an example. Like last week, Matthew, who is impulsive, it's a part of his diagnosis. They were calling me and they wanted to send him for lunch detention because he had acted out. I said, he is exhibiting behaviors within the scope of his diagnosis. Why can you not de-escalate him? You're not taking punitive actions against my child and giving him a disciplinary consequence for behavior that's within the scope of his diagnosis. That's not stuff that comes naturally to me. That's what I've had to learn through the board, saying listen, you're not going to punish my kid because his behavior
something that
says
he can't
you're doing
control.
something else to help me. Yeah, you cannot do that.
And I say the same thing because kindergarten and first grade, my son with autism is getting a little bit better, right? But I remember the kindergarten and first grade journey. I'm like, you know what? If you guys keep calling me about your whole little chart system, about in the red, we're gonna call your mom, and the yellow, those things don't work for kids with autism, right? And I don't even know how many times in an IEP meeting I kept saying that. Please do not use that system with my child. It doesn't work, because that's not how, first of all, that's not culturally in my house, that's not how things work. I grew up in a Latina household. My mom is super old school, so it's either you do this, and there isn't no bargaining here, right? So I never grew up with bargaining. I was told what I needed to do, and that's what needed to happen. And so unfortunately, that's not my son's reality. So I have to kind of bargain with him, but I'm also not going to put him in a space where, okay, Jameer, you're in a red, and this is what's going to happen. And it's like, okay, can I understand why you're so mad? Because one thing I'm learning about my son, and I'm struggling with this too, although he's had all these services, he still doesn't know how to fully express himself emotionally. So he's literally an emotional roller coaster. And I go places and I'm just like, mi gente, listen, I'm trying to work on this, okay? I'm not a doctor. I don't have no acronyms behind my last name. All I know is I'm a parent, that I'm in a struggle, that I still don't understand, because as we all know, autism is not a cookie cutter diagnosis, right? And so I struggle with the punitive discipline actions that a lot of these school districts do. And then you try to understand, because I also worked in a public school system, so I also understand the other side is that a teacher is working with a lot of limited resources, right? So they have a classroom of maybe, because the unions say there have to be a limit of what, 25? Some of the unions are 25. And then they have a classroom with like 30-something kids with one person. How's that effective, right? So then now the teacher's spending more time doing damage control just to get kids to learn. And so what happens to our kids who are impulsive, who do not have that self-regulating technique, right? So then now we're gonna start using these token systems, start taking things away, like we're gonna take your recess away. We're gonna make you sit by yourself during lunch.
That stuff doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Opposite.
It actually,
you take
yes,
recess away from
yes,
the kid,
yes,
it's more behavior. Like
it
that's
doesn't
like
work.
they need to run their bodies.
Yeah.
And then it's like people say, oh, well, we can't get through to him because you guys are not doing it the right way. So you guys want him to respect you and come and talk to you after you taking recess away, you gave him lunch detention, you got him sitting in somebody else's office, you know what I mean? Listening to adult conversations, when he's sitting in the office and he's seeing other teachers walk. How effective is that, right? I don't understand.
It really is a service issue. So if a child is not communicating, or what is the speech therapy that the child is getting? If the child has difficulty regulating his body, or his or her body movements, or his body in space, look at occupational therapy services that he or she may need. Are ABA services in place? How frequent are they? Are they effective? What is the progress monitoring that the district is doing to make sure that the child is responding to whatever intervention is being used? But more importantly, what are the social skills that are being nurtured and developed? Is your child part of a social skills group? Does your child have a way to predict the schedule? Or is the schedule always changing? Because we know children with autism have difficulty with changes in the schedule. Are teachers changing? So really thinking about the perspective of not what's wrong with your child, but what's wrong with the program. What's wrong with the services? What's wrong with what's happening during the day that is putting your child at risk? So really thinking about that, about services, whether they're effective. Where's the evidence that they're effective? Where's the data? And please, parents, please do not allow districts to tell you that you should consider medication. If you are on medication, you have a right to say, a behavior is not corrected through medication. Children become so groggy and sleepy that they're not paying attention to anything, and they're not learning anything. So please do not allow schools to pressure your child into seeking medication because they don't know, because the school staff does not know what to do, because the classes are overcrowded, or the teachers have not had the correct professional development. Take notes. When your child comes home, if they have scratches, if something's not right, if they have a meltdown, find out what's happening in the school, and don't be afraid to say, I want to visit, and tell me sometimes I can visit. I don't want to tell you exactly when I'm coming, because you want to know what's happening in the classroom. On the real tip, you don't want to have a fabricated time and date where everything's going to be, set up. You want to walk in and you want to see what really happens in that classroom.
You cannot be afraid to question. It is critical because I used to feel so intimidated because I assumed that all
But
these
they
people
make you
have
feel that way,
masters,
right? They make you feel that way.
And they'd be calling me up, like asking me to de-escalate my child on the phone. Like, I'm not a rocket scientist. Like, what do I say to calm him down? I say, honey, the train is off the tracks. At any point,
It's not
you
the
can
derail. It's not the
Yeah.
derail.
You're making the right choices at any I'm gonna call your mom, would you make me the bad guy?
Yeah.
That doesn't cut it.
It's
for me.
shameful.
That
And
is
that's what I think I miss insane because I get all emotional. I don't want to do all this, right? But it shames kids. You're putting them on blast in front of all their peers. So then you get kids like, oh, that kid is crazy.
Well,
Tamir doesn't know how to behave. Tamir's always in trouble.
The implementation of making sure the staff is trained. So my child is in a therapeutic class. So we're talking about 4, max 5 kids in a class.
So separate settings.
Separate setting. And he actually went from, he was in a district school. They wouldn't give him a 45-day assessment. I got him into a charter school which paid for the 45-day assessment. And then he went to the SEAM Collaborative, and the district talked me into letting him back in the district because they wanted a separate classroom because it's cheaper for them to do it. Like, this is the road I went down where I got tricked into some stuff, right?
Cheaper to keep them.
Cheaper to keep them. So then, okay, he's back in the district classroom because I'm trying to follow, like, these guys are all experts, and I'm afraid because I love my baby and I want him to be okay, and these guys are all experts, right? So then one day, I was working at home, and I start getting hysterical phone calls from the school, which is about 4 blocks away. And my Matthew, he's in 6th grade now, I think he was in 3rd grade. Matthew fled the building. They couldn't even keep him. So he's in a separate classroom in a separate wing, and he's a runner. Like, he'll
Four or five kids.
Yeah,
They
he
come
didn't see
through all
another
that
kid
stuff,
run.
yeah.
So he runs out the door, okay? So apparently he's running home because he's afraid, okay? My baby's afraid, he's running home to me, okay? And when they get to me, and there's a knock at my door, and there's Matthew, and he's crying, and behind him is like a train. There are like 4 or 5 educators, the principal, and the police following my child. Following him. You cannot de-escalate. You don't have the skills to de-escalate a child who is clearly like in a panic. You know, he's not like a senior in high school. He's not like a big dude. Like, he is my little tiny baby at the, maybe 8 years old at the time. And you don't have the skills, and you've got the police, and you're calling the cops on my kid. Like, and so I bring him inside, and the first thing I say to him is, "Are you okay? You're not in trouble, okay? Mommy's always on your team. Always on your team. No matter what, we can face it together. What happened?" I just started going, and I was afraid I was in so much trouble. I just couldn't stop. I thought I was too far gone, and nobody could help me. And it, like, when you see your child in crisis like that, and you've surrounded him with people that don't have the skills, and I went back to the school, and I was like, where would I put my baby every day? Like, clearly, you guys don't have the skills to deal with a child that has the difficulties or has the diagnosis my child has. So all of this stuff about being able to serve him is a big lie. Why did I take him out of this collaborative?
So I think the issue here is that if your child is in crisis, that school staff and district is in crisis. So I always put it back on the district because they're the service providers. If the outcomes are not great for your child, if your child feels so desperate that he had to flee a situation, he's in a fight or flight situation to save his life in his eyes. That means that school is not providing him with the support that he needs, and he knows it. Children show us what is and what is not working through their behavior. And we need to look at that and say, not that there's something wrong with the child, but there's something not right. Those developmental years, those young years when our children need, we call it early intervention, or early intervening services. If it doesn't happen then, what's happening is that, the child begins to look at him or herself as a failure. I can't do anything right. Something is wrong with me. And that's great that you said that.
It's breaking my heart because, like, the choice, I feel like as a mama, I made the wrong choices. They put him in that redirect room. He went through that situation. Now he has like severe self-esteem issues where he thinks he's a bad boy. He goes to counseling twice a week to deal with that because he's convinced that he's a bad boy. He's a very good boy. And like I feel like I failed him as a parent. It kills me. Like, it makes me fight harder for the work that we do, but like, it's Put him through that.
But this is the part of the emotional part as parents that a lot of people don't understand, right? We trust people to be experts and always forget that we are experts too. That we can't just hand our children to the hands of other people if they don't really understand the impact that they have on our families. So suspending our kids, sending our kids home, calling the police, having them see therapy. A lot of parents don't want to do that. We want to be able to have a so-called normal life.
And we all go through it. So
Yes.
with my son had struggled with reading, one of my children. And so one day when the teacher was forcing him to read aloud, he didn't want to be embarrassed because he had dyslexia. And so he took his book, and this is in 3rd grade, and he threw it on the floor, jumped on it and said, "I'd rather die than read," and ran out of the classroom. And so they called me and said he's suicidal. Long story short, I'm at the IEP meeting, and they said, "Well, you know, your son may never," this is a psychologist, and so that's why I sort of reject the notion of they are experts, because they're not. The psychologist said, your son may never learn to read. And so I said, well, if you cannot teach him, I will find someone who will. And I ended up going through the whole process, BSEA, which is the appeals process, and he ended up in a private school, and now he's very successful. But I had to fight. Because when districts don't know what to do, they put it on the parents. It's the parents' fault, it's the students' fault.
It's always war. So parents and districts.
Parents, we
When you want to do what you do with these kids from these people.
Right, and we have to change that narrative, and no one's going to change it but us. The system is calcified, it's raped, so it's not going to change. The only way it's going to change is if we put, you know, when I remember with soccer games, you know how you say, keep the pressure on, keep the pressure. That's what we have to do. We have to unite as parents and keep the pressure on the district. Don't allow them to put your child in a dysfunctional class. I don't care if it's one class. If that teacher doesn't know what to do, get them out. Because it is going to do harm, and children tend to turn it on themselves. I'm bad, I can't learn, I'm not smart. And that self-esteem issue will carry them through the entire lives. That's why we have the school to prison pipeline.
It's real.
And I work in DYS settings as a consultant. And when I go in these settings where children are incarcerated, 60% of them have IEPs.
Yep.
And
you hear that, right?
90% of them are Black and Latino males,
You hear that, right?
primarily. And so our children they're literally dying for an education. The system is pushing them out, and they're pushing them into these toxic environments that are complete dead ends. This has got to stop, parents. We have to unite around this and change it. So that's why we're here to say that we have the will, the desire to help and support parents one by one or whatever it takes. And I give praises to her for organizing this because it's much needed. So thank you so much.
Not a problem. You know, I like to cause disruption, right? Because I think that oftentimes we don't want to hear the parents' perspective. It's always parents are problems, parents are troublemakers, parents want things that are not real. But at the same time, are you inviting us to the table to be part of initiatives that you want to create? Are you inviting us to the table to really fully understand the special education process? Because I don't know about you guys, but I've sat at IEP meetings, nobody really takes the time to decode the language. So you're sitting there, you hear all these languages, and you know, I know there was like a meme somewhere where a parent left an IEP meeting and they're like with a bottle of wine, because that's what it feels like. You leave there, you're just like, oh my God, they're throwing all these words at you, and you're just like, what does this really mean?
And you try to do it on purpose. Like, the thing that gets me, like I had to learn another, like real life lesson, regression, and trying to take services away. So like Matthew would come back and they capture some data from him the first 2 days after February vacation. And they use that to determine whether or not he would still be eligible for his extended year. Because you know, our kids need structure, they need that extended year, they need to like continue going to school. And they fought me and fought me and fought me. I had to go through the appeals process because apparently he had 2 good days. Those days he came came back from February vacation, so we're gonna cancel, you know, the 8 weeks of, you know, education that he desperately needs to stay on track and be ready for the next year. It was like, you know, learning that they're going to try to use that language and use that to manipulate you because they don't want to pay for it. It's expensive to have extended year. And if he doesn't have it, then I have to come up with $4,000 a month in special needs childcare for month or camp
programming
because
that is really not
eligible. He's not eligible for a normal, you know, summer camp. They won't take him with his IEP, and half of them don't even have to unless you fight. And you know, like
it's a
trying to get you.
It's a disaster. And I don't know, like, do you want to talk more? Because I really want to hear from you, especially with the part of navigating homelessness in a child with special needs. And did you feel the school district was supportive in understanding the struggle that you were going to and help you alleviate some of those stresses, at least while your child was in their care? What did that feel like? Because I just feel, at least when I worked in the school system, you know, a lot of kids who were in DCF custody and navigating homelessness, I feel like those are the kids we kind of put to the side. Oh, this kid got an issue going on, but never really cared to break down what that issue really was for that child.
Yeah, it was extremely difficult. This is back in 2014. That's when we had filed for homelessness. And just going through that whole process, going to the DTA center, getting your trash bags and heading down there to get on a list to get into some type of hotel. God knows if it's 10 miles away or 100 miles away. If you could be in Central Mass today and going to way part of the western part of Mass, you know, it was just difficult altogether. But when my oldest, she's 9 now, I didn't have no idea, but she was going through these difficulties. Because I had got a voucher, daycare voucher, and I said, you know, this is a good way for me to go back into the work field and so I can deal with what I'm dealing with and eventually get back on my feet, you know. But the providers, the first daycare, that was having a hard time. They couldn't, you know, escalate her problems. Send her to another one because I thought it was the preschool. I thought it was the daycare provider. They weren't helping me. I put her to a private daycare and they weren't helping me at all. They suggested, you know, why don't you try to do some early intervention? Well, she was already over the age of, you know, early intervention. So we got into a lottery for the Head Start. That's when it started to make a little bit more sense for me that she was actually on the spectrum of autism. They had some services through, I was at Lowell at the time, so Lowell Public School and Head Start, they had like a combined center where they had speech, occupational, and you know, those services right there in the Head Start, so she can go and transition to go and feel for the situation. But at the time, I was still dealing with, how am I dealing with this? You know, like, the teachers are not able to navigate. She can't sit still. She can't, you know, do like the kids were in the round, you know, sitting down, reading time, everything. They were doing all these different modifications. That's another thing that they don't tell you that they can do. They can have like these noise canceling headphones for the child. If they need them, they have these padded vests that are weighted that they can help them and stuff like that. But I didn't know. I'm like, why is they giving them her this? You know, so I had to learn by myself. I had to look up autism books. I looked up pamphlets, you know, not aside from trying to get a diagnosis from some of these developmental doctors, which takes months and months just to get a diagnosis, to figure out what is going on with your child. So just doing that reading and trying to intervene with the teachers and the providers that was there, I kind of learned to navigate through the system a little bit better. But there's some of my peers, when I was in my hotel, they had their children having disabilities. They didn't know how to navigate, you know, because they're dealing with homelessness. They're dealing with no food, barely no food, you know, on the table, you know, let alone their child that's running up and down the hallways, and the hotel people telling them, you need to quiet your kids down, you need to get them down. Well, I mean, she's struggling with so many difficulties at this time.
It's a
You know,
preparation.
so I mean, it's difficult. They don't tell you that, when you're in the school districts, when they say, oh, this family, now they're doing that, where they're catering to the families that have homelessness now, and they're accommodating them now. But back then, there was no accommodating for homelessness families that were having kids that have disabilities. There was no accommodation whatsoever.
Well, what I'd like to say is that there is something called the McKinney Veto Act, and so that is specifically a federal law designed for children who are homeless. And so what that act says is that if, for example, and I know you said, you travel all over the state, if you are homeless, your home school where you moved from, even if your home school, for example, is Boston, and now you're living, say, in Westboro, Boston is still responsible for providing services while you're homeless in a shelter in Westboro. And so every school has a social worker, and that social worker is responsible for making sure that wherever you are, even if you move from place to place, your child gets those services and supports. You either get it from another school district that's paid by Boston, or, if you move, that social worker is responsible. There's something called child find, and that law says that school districts are responsible for finding every child that has a disability and provide appropriate services. So whether you're homeless or not, that school has an obligation. They should not be marking the child absent. So it's the McKinney Veto Act is what it's called. It is a law, and so your services should be in place, not only for your child, because the services, you said your child was older, too old for early intervention. Public schools start services at 2.9.
Yep.
And so, and the reason that it's 2.9 is so that there's enough time to have the services in place by the time the child is 3. So school districts are responsible for any child with a disability from age 3 up until 22 or until they graduate. So if they graduate at 18, services stop. But every child with a disability has a right to be in school and get services, even if those services are provided in the home. If your child is sick, there's also home services. If your child is hospitalized, that's also considered home hospital services. So it's really important for parents to know this
And they
information.
don't tell us this.
No, and it's
They
so
don't
important
tell us
because I'm
this.
just thinking about like the kids that get pushed out. The kids that get, disciplined out of the system. And not knowing that like a lot, or now knowing, because you told us, like a lot of these kids are on IEPs. A lot of these kids, are probably undiagnosed in terms of the services that they need. So it makes so much sense because our kids, when they're just displaying, probably a symptom of their diagnosis, and they haven't been diagnosed, instead they end up in the principal's office and in the school to prison pipeline, like, because that's just what it is.
Yeah.
Like that push out is not legal. They have a right to get those services.
And that has a name too.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Edith.
so-
Not Edith in the house.
So that part is called manifestation determination. So just like what you said, is that if the behavior is a manifestation of the child's disability, it's literally interpreted that way in the law, then the child cannot be suspended. So there is a 10-day rule, and it's not consecutive, it's cumulative. So if your child has been suspended, and by suspension, it could be in school, it could be out of school, being sent to the principal's office is considered an in-school suspension. Why? Because that child is denied access. And so as soon as that child is pulled out of the classroom, that is considered a suspension. If your child is sitting in the principal's office, coloring, drawing, or doing whatever, that is an in-school suspension, and it must be reported. So what the law says is that a child should not be punished for having a disability, and that's what's happening.
I'm getting the chills
So-
because I say 36 times, but if we're talking about how many times he was just sent to the principal, like,
That's,
it was so many more times than that. Like, that was
Not
36
the
more
no
times.
accessing the general curriculum.
Right,
That's
and
all it is.
so that's what
And how they
happens.
document
I had
it.
no idea. I
And no other thing, because I know in my district, I get a lot of messages in my Facebook inbox all the time. And me and other parents kind of get together as a collective, we're like, wait a minute, so your child's been suspended, my child's been suspended, so. But right here, the numbers of suspension numbers seem really, really low for the amount of people who are talking about this. So there's a whole other conversation in how they document that.
That's
right?
important,
And they
yes.
cover some districts, cover up those tracks, right? So schools don't go in the red, because when you start documenting all that stuff,
Then the state starts looking.
the state
Exactly.
starts looking, and so to avoid the state to kind of investigate and kind of be like, wait a minute, you got a high number of, suspensions, expulsions, they do things totally different to hide it. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I feel like for your child to be suspended that many times, and you're gonna sit here and tell me that they pushed back on a 45-day assessment, that after a certain amount of time, they should have known, like, listen, we gotta figure something out here,
Yeah.
right?
And
How do we deal with that?
I was yelling, screaming, and they were saying it's so expensive. To be sent to the SEAM Collaborative for that 45-day assessment was too much money, and they dragged their feet. Just like to get the formal diagnosis, like to get the in-school testing for his autism diagnosis. He had been diagnosed by the doctor, but we wanted to put him through like the battery of testing.
Yeah.
It took us until 5th grade.
It shouldn't take that long.
Until 5th grade. He had already had a
Pushback be
conversation.
real, though. The pushback be real.
They fight and they fight and
Yeah.
they fight and they fight, and then they say we want to test, we want to go through another data collection period. And then all of a sudden it's the next year, and then you have a new teacher that you have to break in.
Yeah.
And what's funny is like I started asking these folks, I had to break in so many new teachers. Now I ask them, I'm like, could you tell me like where you went to school, like what you're like asking for their credentials?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. Like
How long have you taught?
How
Have
long
you taught?
where have you been
Yeah.
trained? Like what kind of kids, do you have experience with? Because I feel like, at every point I have to teach educators how to interact with my child, like as a parent. And having, like, I have 3 kids, I'm a single mama, that the hustle is real, like all of that stuff. The amount of labor it takes for us to do, and we have to do it, because if we don't, then your kid's just they're gonna push them right out. I mean, I had first-hand experience with that. I was not a special needs student. I was identified as gifted and talented, but that can also be very problematic, because they could not wait to expel me. They could not wait to get me out of that school, because I was in DCF and I was a kid dealing with trauma, and I wasn't going to play by rules because I was a wounded kid and wanted to fight.
But that's all you need. That was your survival technique, though.
Yeah. And so, like, you think about kids that don't have the coping strategies. You think about kids that have been given up on, have been failed from, pre-K. Kids that are growing up, in situations that they have no control over. Like, I remember being a kid, I had no control over what was happening. A lot of us don't have control over what's going on in our universe. And we just try to do it, we do things the best way we can. But it's the system is set up. Like, unfortunately, like, if we're talking about institutional racism, which we have to put, like, right on the table.
Yeah.
Like,
That's like in the forefront,
the
right?
system is not set up to educate Black and brown kids, especially not Black and brown special needs kids. So we're trying to, like, as you said before, like, fight for our kids in a system that's built on white supremacy. And conform, force them to conform in a system that does not fit their needs. And so there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of fighting, and you have to learn all of these new things, these new tricks, and that's why I think it's so important that, like, parents connect to each other, because nobody's going to help you. Unless you find, like, folks like you, Teresita Ramos from Ramos Law, who is the former head of the Mass Law Reform Institute. She is fire.
She's a beast.
She is, and she will help you on a sliding scale. So if you need to sue somebody, call Teresita, and she is literally
She's
a
a
special
beast.
needs mama who put herself back into Harvard Law because she was so mad about being in research.
And it's unfortunate, and hopefully, forums like this will help, to before you can do things before you get to that place. So it's important for parents to know whether or not the teacher is certified in special ed.
Yes.
But it's more
Yes.
important to know if that teacher is a highly qualified, certified special education teacher. And what do I mean by that? What are the results that sometimes teachers go through a short-term, and I call them drive-by-night certification program that really doesn't give them the depth of knowledge that they need in order to address it. Do they have training in ABA? Is there a BCBA, a board certified behavioral analyst in your school? Not just a
Not one
behavior,
that's shared.
not
Not one that's shared among
there's only
6 schools or 4 schools, because I don't know.
Well,
I'm sorry to
there's
kind of
only
get
one.
into that because I'm a little upset about that. So in my district, they have a BCBA who's licensed and certified, but this person is in charge to oversee several
Right.
schools to teach teachers the consultation model of ABA, but no kids are getting direct ABA. So
Right.
that's one of the things that
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
woke me up with my
We do
school
that.
district was when I transferred from Boston to Randolph, and it was time for us to do our IEP all over again. I'm like, okay, so I don't see no progress reports from his ABA. It was literally a pin could have dropped in that room and we would have heard it. So I'm sitting here like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Oh, we don't do direct ABA. Hold up. So my child has already been here for this long. You're gonna wait till now till we have to redo the whole IEP over to tell me that he didn't get ABA, right? And so this is where kindergarten and first grade was such a big issue because everything that they kept calling me for was because this should have been given to him through his ABA service.
And then they'll turn it around and say, well, we don't have that here. Not my problem. It's in his IEP.
Yes.
You are legally
Yes.
mandated to give you
Yes.
that service. If
Yes.
you don't have the staff to deal with it,
Yes.
that's not my problem. That's your problem. You need to hire somebody to fulfill the requirements of his IEP.
Yes.
Like, that's the other thing I had to learn. Like, that's why you will take that IEP. Like,
You gotta comb through it.
You gotta comb through it. Okay, don't accept, oh, well, we don't do that here, it's different here, or we don't have those services. Well, you better find those services, because my son needs those services.
And trigger words for that is if a district tells you 3 things, and parents, please listen to this.
Please listen to these 3.
If they say, well, we only do, we never do, or we always do. Those are 3 triggers that districts use to say, well, no, we only do this, or we never do that. We don't have it. If your child, let's talk about the purpose of special ed. The purpose of special ed is to reduce the impact of a child's disability on his or her performance. So whether it's, hitting a reading target, being able to do math equations, whatever it is, if the service is not specifically doing that, then there's a problem, not with your child, with the service. And that's why it's important to find out if teachers are duly certified, but also highly qualified, like the BCBA, not a behavior tech. Because a behavior tech should only be working with your child with a direct supervision. That means that person is in the room. And usually what districts do is they'll have one BCBA, and unfortunately, that person's a supervisor. They don't provide direct
And
services.
to see and to oversee so many different schools by one person. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
You know what? And adding to that, and I'm glad you're saying that because even I have a few parents who participate in Autism Spreader at Randolph. And a lot of the parents, through me being the troublemaker, because I'm known as a troublemaker in my town, right? And I took it to social media. Let me tell you guys, if I would have knew my superintendent's mother's name, the previous superintendent, if I would have known his mother's name, she would have got tagged on my post. She said, who did you raise? Is this your son? Because we got a problem here.
Your son.
Like your son. Talk to your son, mama. So a lot of parents uncovered of literally me taking a screenshot of Jameer's IEP that says Randolph Public Schools does not provide direct ABA. My inbox, and I was like, oh, so now y'all want to talk to me, right? So Jihad has been known to be on a Facebook group, let me tell you guys, I've probably been banned from almost every Facebook group in Randolph, but I'm okay with that because I started my own, because you're not going to silence my voice and I'm not going to fit nobody's narrative, right?
But this is what we have to do.
So do
They
every
would rather
time
you
to
do
shut us
the
down.
villain
Yeah.
than do the right thing.
Wow.
Yes, yes,
Like,
yes.
It's important to find like solidarity with other mamas.
Yes.
Because they will try to turn it on you.
And make you feel like you're crazy.
Yep.
Make you,
You're
and
not
then
the
so
best.
many parents find out that they have their children in these, Randolph doesn't do autism strand programs, kind of like Boston labels their programs, right? You're in a town, so things get a little different. So I think they changed it from a CLC, a Community Learning Center, to now it's called RISE. So all this program was designed specifically for kids with communication disorders and parents. But most of the kids got autism. Most of them are not verbal, but you're not going to provide them ABA? I'm so confused. So these parents, a lot of parents, I don't know about you and you as autism parents, they make it seem like ABA is the end all be all of all services, right?
Yeah.
So if ABA is technically not the service to deal with behavior, it's to teach your child to use language to address their behavior, to be able to communicate by their behavior, or kind of develop that speech. So you're not going to provide that service in a communication impaired classroom, and then it takes another parent to expose that, and half of these parents have ABA written in their IEP. So now we're talking about a whole civil issue that if a boatload of us ever got together and we filed this big civil lawsuit against districts, because we can if we wanted to, what's going to happen?
So the other thing that's important to look out for is if they do put something in the IEP,
Yeah.
that a lot of districts write what we call cookie cutter IEP.
Yes.
Sometimes they forget to put take the other child's name off of the IEP, so you might like, who's Erin? This is my child. And so the thing is that, ABA services are the only research-based services that are proven, validated to have an impact on children with autism. But if they put it in the IEP and they don't have someone who's duly licensed and qualified and can implement it, then your child's not getting ABA services. The other thing about ABA is a vehicle through which your child can be more attentive to the content areas like reading and math and history and social studies, because they're given tools and strategies that work. And some ABAs may, like you said, use a weighted vest, or you use the earplugs at certain intervals because they know when that child is impacted. And it's not something that your child may always need in every classroom, but depending on what is suitable. So really, parents, think about that. Look at your IEP and ask the question, well, it says ABA, who's qualified to implement it, and is it being provided? Because a lot of IEPs are not fully implemented, and the services are not actually being provided.
And just to throw in there real quick, that you can look up if these people are licensed through a DESE directory that will tell you what licensing teachers here in the state of Massachusetts hold, when did they get them, and when they expire. And also for the BCBA, there's also a registry where you can check out if a provider, whether it's through an agency or the person who's coming to provide that service to your child, is registered and is in fact licensed to do that job. Just so you know.
It's you always have to do your homework. You cannot just trust what you've been getting. And so just to that end, I just want to piggyback on what you guys are both saying. Like, just because they write it down does not mean they actually do it. That's the next step. So once you actually fight to get it on the IEP, then you have to make sure your kid's actually getting services. Because, teachers and specialists go out on leave, or this happens, or that happens. And suddenly your kid's not getting OT twice a week, it's only once a week. And then you see regression, or then you see certain behaviors, or you're seeing, problems with academics, all of these different things that are the result of the lack of implementation of the IEP and not having those supports there. So you've always got to check up too, to make sure, like, we have like not a point system, but a chart system. So I track Matthew every single hour and get like an update on what's happening, his pullouts, how things went, all of those things, because like, my child is on medication and I need to track it. He's kind of going through that puberty growth spurt, so we're tracking to make sure it doesn't need to be adjusted and stuff like that. So you gotta make sure that that's happening. And the other thing I wanna mention, if your child is on medication, that's another thing that you have to track as well.
Documented on the IP.
It's gotta be documented, and then I have actually had some problems with nurses and getting medications at the right time. We actually had to change the policy in my town because my child got medicine before school and then would have to take another pill at noontime. She didn't like giving him the pill at noontime because it interfered with her lunch. So she called my child's doctor to change his doctor's order without getting permission from me to change it to 1 o'clock.
That's a HIPAA violation.
It's all kinds of violations. So now we have to have a very explicit policy in the city of Medford, which we had to change, which we had to fight for at the school committee. And I had my aunt, who was actually on the school committee, like she could not believe this. Like, this is how hard you have to fight, even if you have a relative who's on the damn committee, you can't get it done. So it's like a constant fight. I had to bring into the next IEP meeting the director of nurses for the city of Medford to be like, let's be clear. I will come for your license if you make a decision about my child's medication without my authorization. But again, like I feel bad because I feel like I'm so wounded, I'm so traumatized as a mom of going through this. I always assume negative intent, and I hate to like put that out in the universe, but you gotta like.
But it's okay.
At any point, you gotta be like, okay, what are they gonna do next? What's up next? Like,
And make sure there's a nurse in the building.
Oh my
Teachers should
goodness,
not
that
be
nurse is
given-
shared and split by 4 different schools because that happens too. So you don't even know your child is even in fact getting the medication that they're supposed to get in time, because some school districts want to save money, have one person working 4 different schools or whatever the case. How is your child gonna, especially if your child has a medical necessity, whether it's like the EpiPen and all those things, and you're not gonna have a nurse in the building? Are you serious? But yet you got administrators making $150,000, $60,000 a year? What? Y'all don't even wanna get me mad.
And make sure there's a safety plan around any child that's getting a medication, and your child should not be taking the medication without a nurse present. Some children do use inhalers because they're at a certain age, so they know how to use it. But with medication, you have to make sure that the nurse is involved. Your child should not carry the medication. The teacher should not have the medication. The nurse should be the point person, and the nurses being in the building is an issue.
And legally, they're supposed to be in the building. Do you know if there's like a policy or like a law that says that if there's X, Y, and Z amount of kids with asthma or that need medication or have like a physical disability, is there like anything that specifically states that full-time nurse is required if the X, Y, Z amount of kids are in the building that requires
it's not necessary.
assistance?
It's not necessarily a number of children, it's the nature of the medical condition. So say for someone that has a feeding tube, and if you have children in schools that have feeding tube, that child should not be in a building where there's not a full-time nurse. So it could be just one child. It's not a number issue. But if your child has a medically indicated condition that requires the constant monitoring or care of a nurse, or the nature of the medication that the child is taking because of the side effects, or your child has a seizure disorder, or might have a swallowing issue, and there's an issue in terms of the child being safe, then you want to make sure that there is a full-time nurse. So that's the HIPAA law, which is medical, but your child is also, there's the FERPA law, is Family Educational Rights Parents Act, I believe, FERPA. So
Write this down.
that's a special ed law. So that confidentiality of records should not be released to anyone without the direct permission of the parent. So for that teacher to call a hospital, it's violating both laws. And so, that really puts districts at a disadvantage and makes it legally vulnerable. But the point is that all of this information is
Not
lost. Every special ed administrator and teachers get training in this, and they know that they're violating the law.
Yeah, but they're
But
not trying to
parents-
tell you anything
they're
about
not
that.
trying to
Like,
tell you
that's
that.
the bottom line. It's like, no one is going to open it up, give you a map, give you a log, like, there's no book on this. Like, unfortunately, like, when they give us our beautiful babies, you know, as special and wonderful as they are, there's not like even if you have a you know, regularly performing child, like, there's no manual that they can use. And so it's just fighting not only, you know, the system, you know, but the racism on top of it, the cultural issues. It's just, you've got to remain constantly vigilant.
You have to
But you
always
know,
ask questions.
Special education laws have been on the books since 1975. So these laws are clear, they're enforceable. Districts have to write reports, you know, how many times has your child been suspended. There are certain cases where if your child has an incident, it has to be reported to the state within 5 days. So everything has a timeline, everything has a law. And the problem is that a lot of parents don't know the questions to ask.
Yeah.
If you don't know what to ask, then you don't know,
what you don't
that
know.
that's a law and you're entitled. So, you know, that's why this conversation is so critically important.
And we gotta take this conversation into action too, because knowing how bad the reporting, the data, all of that is, like, we can't hold systems accountable unless we have information.
Yeah.
So that's why participating at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, they have a special ed policy committee, making sure that there's adequate representation of the right demographics on that board, because frankly, it is mostly white, it is mostly privileged, it is like problematic. So like changing the makeup of that board, giving those mamas, you know, some teeth, some support so that they can hold Jeff accountable for making sure that this
That's the
board.
Commissioner of Education.
Jeff,
Just so you guys know.
by the way, who by the way is a special needs
Yes.
dad.
He
And
is.
frankly, you know, you were talking about being at the end of the IEP table and being like, oh my gosh, as an educator. He shared with me and with our MPU parents when we did a Facebook Live with him. He was in the same position, like at the time he was like a deputy superintendent for BPS, and his child's going to BPS. Like they were still talking to him, like he didn't know what he was doing. Could you imagine? You know, so he's still in the mix.
Well, in defense of Mr. Riley, Commissioner of Education, I think he's doing a great job and a lot of work in this area. I sit on the Special Ed Advisory Panel with the state, and I can say that, you know, I'm happy to be there, but you're absolutely right. There are not many voices like myself, and I sit on that panel as a parent, even though I'm also an educator, because parent is the longest role that you'll play in your life.
Forever.
You know, you can retire from your profession, but you don't retire as a parent. Even
You
when
become
you're
a grandmother, and then you have all the, you're still parents.
even when your children are older, you know, so I say to parents, you know, it's sort of like if you plant tomato seeds, you're gonna get tomatoes.
Yeah.
So whatever the district designs, don't accept that. Don't accept something that you know is not gonna help your child. Look at services, look at placement, because that's gonna have an indelible, permanent, and long effect on how your child develops. So parents, please ask all the questions, take your time, call us, you know, bring a friend, take notes, bring your own notes into the meeting to advocate for who you know your child is, and don't let anyone second guess you. Because you're the one who is the expert. I always say that parents are experts, so do not let anyone extinguish your voice, because your child, after your child finishes school, you're gonna be there with your child after education process is all over. When they're in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 50s, and you want your child to be independent. You want your child to have all the things and the benefits that society has offered. And the last thing I want to say is that education is the only equalizing opportunity for our children to get, take advantage of the benefits that exist in society, with regard to you want your child to be self-sufficient, to have a job, to be able to vote, to drive a car, to get married,
To give us
be a
beautiful
parent.
grandbabies.
So,
Exactly.
this is what you're fighting for. This is what you are fighting for. It's not a quick fight. So if you have to go into that ring and go 15 rounds, to get to that knockout or beyond, you have to keep fighting. Don't ever stop fighting.
But don't put like that. I feel that what you're saying is important because I feel like they put our kids in a box, and so I don't feel like our kids' goal or how they end up is bagging your groceries at your local grocery store. That if that's what you or school districts think that we're transitioning our kids and we're helping them, you're limiting their ability to grow and be your next, decoders or gaming creators. You don't know, and I feel like oftentimes they put our kids in a box and limiting their access to be actually very successful because we are in a state in education where we teach kids for testing. We're teaching kids to create data, but there's literally no outcome. Where are the outcomes of all those data? Because nothing has ever changed. When are we going to start teaching kids to be the next movie directors? When are we going to teach them to be the ones to create another different app, Facebook, another app like this? When are we going to start teaching them to be our gamers? We need to start thinking outside of the box and how we're teaching in education nowadays because it's so flawed that the reality is that we're holding not just special needs kids back, we're holding neurotypical kids back.
And don't believe that your child cannot go to college.
Yep.
The research shows us that children with Down syndrome, with intellectual impairments can go to college, and they do.
And they
So
provide
regardless
accommodations.
Right, regardless of what the nature and impact of your child's disability is, in college and career readiness, and make sure that your target, when you put your child in school, think of where they're going to go after school. And they should have vocational options, they should have college and career readiness like everyone else. Don't ever let anyone tell you that your child cannot go to college. They told me I couldn't go to college when I was in high school. It was because I'm black. I'm black and female. So they're telling our children, but when your child has a disability on top of it, then it's really a time to say, no, I want my child to go to college. If they're in kindergarten and they say, what are your goals? I want my child to graduate and go to college. What are the services that are required so that my child can have that pathway?
It's funny when you think about that though, because so many of the things that they identify about our children as deficits are actually assets.
They are. I always say that. It's my child's best asset. What are you talking about?
You take a look at Greta, who's like leading the climate change movement. Her focus, her perspective. Just because kids are different and they're in special education, it does not necessarily mean that
they can't
deficit
produce.
is different. And the thing is too, I see the testing thing a little bit differently. I think we need to change our curriculum, and frankly, there's been focus groups across New England talking about the fact that parents and students are why are we learning the stuff we're learning? Why don't we have updated curriculum? But just like in special ed, I feel like testing is important because if we don't have metrics and data to hold systems accountable, they continue to play us. And they will tell us you're walking into this beautiful school and there's rainbows everywhere. It is very easy to find people who can love our children. It's very hard to find people who can teach them, and we need to make sure that we have people who are capable of that in the classroom. We've got to test them to make sure that they're ready to do that. It's a tough job, and if they need help, we need some kind of data. And unfortunately, it's not a perfect system. I don't think the tests are right either, but we got to have something, because otherwise they'll be like, you're crazy, look at this beautiful building, everybody's happy and joyous. No one can read, but
I've always told a teacher when in my graduate courses that I taught, I always say that, you don't have to love the students, you have to educate them. Because the parents
love the education part.
The parents are going to love them. So when someone says, oh, but I love your child, that is meaningless, but what are you doing to educate my child? Because I love my child. I don't need you to love my child. I need you to educate my child.
I was working with a parent the other day who was sitting there in a started out like every other parent teacher. Your child was a joy to have in class. I love it. So
It
great.
feels scripted,
Yeah.
though. It feels so
It's
scripted.
meaningless.
It just feels scripted.
Like, my child is missing like 12
patronizing.
reading sounds, like these sounds.
Yes.
He's like behind the curve. So like, I know my child is lovely. It drives me crazy about the charter schools too, trying to rate kids about like grade kids on grit or love. Please don't
Yeah.
grade my child on love.
Yeah.
Like, don't even go there. with
Yeah.
it. Like, we send our kids into the system somewhat reluctantly. In my case, I'm a little nervous about doing that right now. To learn,
Right.
to get a set of skills. Like, I am there as their parent to guide them through, all of those character development things. I want them to learn some things. But bottom line is like, we make a promise to kids that they're gonna learn how to read, they're gonna learn math skills, they're gonna learn about, civics, all of these things, and are we keeping those promises? And like, unless I have some data to hold them accountable and say like, no, my kid cannot read or is not reading at grade level, you need to do something about it, they'll just push me off.
And I have to say that this is Black History Month, but I say that Black history is American history. We should not focus on the month. We also need to teach our children who are Latino their history.
Yeah.
That we need to decolonize the curriculum and begin to teach
Christopher
our.
Columbus did not find America.
No, let's call it day of,
Let's
it's
not
called a
say
day of
already.
mourning.
That's old
It's a
already.
day of mourning. So we need to make sure that our children are exposed to images that look like them, images of people who have
And not be
accomplished
scared
great
to do
things.
it.
But
Not
we
be
need to
scared
begin, we need to ask schools to, or demand that schools tell the truth
Yeah.
about historical
And
events.
the truth is hard.
And not disadvantage people of color, so that we're always looked upon as in a negative light. We need to have that as a seamless part of the curriculum throughout the year, celebrating, our heroes of color, that and all the accomplishment, the inventions, and not attributed to other people who really didn't invent the things that they're making claim to.
I know that you wanted to say something. I can't remember where we were. You're like, yes. Do you remember what that was?
I don't know, I'm disagreeing with everything that you're saying. But I mean, one point I definitely want to say is when you're in those IEP meetings, even if you're just by yourself, take all the notes you can, grab the notes that the administrator, the special ed team member there that's doing all the work. When you get it in the mail, you get it from your kid's backpack, have someone to come and look at it.
Yeah.
Maybe have
Yeah.
call the federation, call one of us, call
Yes.
someone,
Yes.
and then just so you can understand it, you're not signing away that, that
Because
your
it's a
child.
legal document.
That
And
is
you
so
don't
true.
have to sign it for the time period they give you.
Right.
I learned that's a great
Yeah.
trick. You can only sign it if you want. You can sign an IEP for 24 hours. You can sign it for a week. If you're not happy, like, you don't have to sign up for 6 months and hope it works out. If you don't trust what's happening, or you want to see progress, or you want another meeting or check-in, again, you have the power to do this. Like, the power's in your control.
Yes.
One of the best things I ever learned, like where it really changed for me, is I started viewing my kids' IEP, this is my meeting. They may have some
Yes.
things they want to talk
Yes.
about, I'm here to talk
Yeah.
about Matthew, and these are the things I'm going to
Yeah.
talk about first,
Yeah.
and then I'll hear you out.
Yeah.
These are my concerns.
Yeah.
When you walk in there empowered, and you say, okay, if we're talking about Matthew, this is my meeting.
Yeah.
Like, just with that mentality, like, it'll flip a switch. Go in empowered,
Yeah.
don't let them run you. Don't let them run you.
And that's why I was saying with the whole testing thing, not that I'm opposed to it, but I struggle with the fact that if we're always collecting data and nothing changes, what are we doing wrong, right? We need outcomes. So if we're gonna
Yeah.
collect this data, I need an outcome. And I don't want, sometimes I feel in parent-teacher conference, oh, your child's doing great, so lovely, it's such a joy to have in the classroom. And then next thing you know it, you get a progress report 2 weeks later that say the complete opposite of what you told me when I was with you 2 weeks ago. Why? So you're gonna sit here and tell me your child's producing, it's able to read and write, and then you guys do an assessment to determine, oh, okay, we're a little behind. Okay, but why didn't you tell me that 2 weeks ago? And why would you only allot me 15 minutes? Only 15 minutes for us to have a parent-teacher conference. I mean, 15 minutes, I mean, the first probably 5-6 minutes is us getting together, putting paperwork together, and then we really only have like 5-6 minutes to talk about my child's academic, whether it's success or regression or whatever. That's not ideal, right? So I want to see, when people take this data, I want to see outcomes. So if you continue to collect data and my child is still not making progress, we need to have a different conversation.
What I would encourage every parent with the concerns that you expressed, particularly in you as well, all of you, is to have written into the IEP that you will have a homeschool communication notebook. So that way, the teacher, talking about the data, will give you a summary of how your child did that day. And you can also respond back to that. And so if you really want to figure out what's going on, you will have that 180 days of data right there for you to assess. The other thing is that when you're at an IEP team meeting, the team chairperson is required to give you a summary of the meeting at the end of the meeting, not the next day. You should be walking away with the notes. That's very, very important. Because a lot of times what happens is someone might change something or add something. So you can check once you do get that IEP, if it's consistent with what the summary says in terms of the services that are proposed, and it is a proposal. An IEP is a proposal. Parents, you don't have to accept it. It's like buying a house. You don't want to buy it sight unseen. You want to check it out, every room, look at it, assess it, and determine whether or not that's a place you want to reside. Because that IEP is going to sit with your child for a whole year. And you should also be getting quarterly progress reports. So if you're not getting progress reports, and this is in addition to the homeschool notebook, but it has to be written in the IEP, the homeschool notebook. The progress report should be given to every parent, and it shouldn't be a checklist. It should be a narrative in terms of the progress your child is making towards each and every goal in the content area, and it should have benchmarks. The benchmark is my child reading at the second grade level, and he or she is in second grade. So it should tell you how your child is doing with regard to the benchmark for that grade level. So make sure you get that.
One of the things, I just pulled it up really quickly, I get every single afternoon from my child's teacher is literally a screenshot of his tracker every single day. Because the homeschool notebook was triggering for Matthew because he thought for him to show me if he had something that was tricky that day or challenging. I was like, oh, I gotta show mom because there's still that fear factor. So this takes him out of the equation, so I can monitor what's happening without him having to feel like, oh gosh.
They might have
It could be electronic.
They wrote something
And
bad.
every day by 3 o'clock, I get just a screenshot of what happened. And if something was tricky, I can say, hey, bud, what was up in PE? Perfect example of this. They had, another tale of the IEP table. They had assumed that because my child was in a separate environment and he was autistic, that they shouldn't give him access to foreign language. They put him in.
I'm telling you, they put our kids in a box.
They do, and they put him in 6 periods of PE a week. So that means one day he had 2 PE. So I'm looking at a schedule, I'm looking at all this stuff, and he'd never been given any options or anything like that. And just run it out. And my kid is like a gamer kid, and he's an artist, and he's not trying to do PE once a week, let alone 6 times a week. So he was miserable and acting out and all that stuff. And so I'm starting to look at this. I'm like, why is PE on this every single day? And immediately within 2 weeks, and then they push back and they say, well, it's not time for a meeting yet. I'm like, it is time for a meeting right now.
And I can request these
anytime.
But because I was able to track every single day, this comes up every time he's in PE. What's happening in PE? And then the PE teacher comes in, has no training with special needs kids, let alone autistic kid. Well, Matthew likes to take every single ball out of the cage. And then I have to chase him, she was clearly put upon because, my kid's doing what unfortunately, Matthew does. He wants to see all the balls, And so, but I was able to be empowered with the information, take him out of the equation so he's not indicted, but requesting that information. You can get down to I can see what my kid's doing every hour if I want to. And sometimes
I'm glad that you're using that term indicted, right? Because one of the things that I've gone through was that autism and ADHD present themselves very similar, right? And so I was getting a lot of pushback to say, oh, well, we don't see any autism traits. I'm like, here we go, people. So now you want to change my child's diagnosis. They change wording, and this is one thing that we have to be very mindful how they document things on IEP. Because they can change the language without you even realizing that they're literally trying to change your child's diagnosis from you. So when you go see your developmental specialist, he or she is combing through the IEPs and documents. Oh, we might need to do a new assessment because it seems like your child might fall on it. Oh, so now you want to push through ADHD, change my child's diagnosis. So then now we're going to have a conversation to Medicaid, which I'm not opposed to any of that stuff, right? But don't try to wiggle yourself through yourself as an educator challenging my child's diagnosis to then having the doctor change my child's diagnosis, and now we're having a whole different conversation. And then it's also the language you have to pay attention, because sometimes they use incriminating language, and it already tells you your child is heading through the school to prison pipeline when they're using words that you're like, are we in a courtroom or are we in a classroom? Because I'm confused. And so they do that so often, and I learned that the hard way when I had to kind of fight with my developmental specialists. They're like, oh, well, based on what the new progress reports and the assessment that they're doing, it seems like he might not fall under the spectrum. And I'm like, no, guys, we're not going to do this. And the whole process of just getting a new neuro site was a disaster. I was on a waiting list for like about a year just to get one, and then there was changes with the health insurance, and it was completely crazy. And then it ended up being that he was both on the autism spectrum and ADHD.
Because that is a thing.
Yeah. And that is a thing, right? But I felt like at that moment, the ones that were servicing my child, they were making it seem like it was only ADHD when I felt like there was a combination of two. And
they don't trust you.
And I felt like they wasn't trusting me, and then it just gets so frustrating because they feel like parents who, like us, who understand and have navigating systems and are self-teaching, because nobody taught us the information we know. We taught ourselves, and we're now in return taking the information that we have to spread it to the masses, so that parents like us, especially the colored families, don't have to go through what we went through, because it's really a thing. And nobody systematically breaks down any of this information to you. And it's like, I feel like they have a plan for the plan, right? And then the plan is finding ways to decrease services sometimes, finding ways for the district not to pay for certain things, and they're not truthful about that. And so one of the things that I want us to really talk about is how they expect us to engage as parents, right? So they want parents to participate in as many of the meetings that they have, whether it's curriculum night, math night. They want us to attend school committee meetings so that we can be well versed in the conversation. But the reality is that you have to cook, you gotta clean, and if you work a full-time job, you're working from 9 to 5 to then get off of work, to then making sure that your child has food on the table so that they can eat, then go sit at a meeting for 2 hours, so then we still have homework to do, right? And then how do they expect us to really be involved?
So can I say something about that before though? So if you feel that they're trying to change services or try to change the diagnosis, there's something called stay put.
Yes.
So
yes.
stay put
yes.
is
yes.
a law that says you cannot make any changes. If you reject a change, then they have to go back to the old IEP.
Yes.
Until they can straighten it out. So if you feel that your district is trying to reduce services to save money and or change a diagnosis, and you don't believe that's right, the stay put law says they cannot do that without your permission.
Yes.
And so that IEP, which may be outdated, still is in effect with the diagnosis to which you agree.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I want to say is that ADHD is a subcategory, so it's called concomitant issue. But within the autism spectrum, a child with autism, each one is different.
Yeah.
But there are, communication issues.
Yeah.
There's also ADHD, and so they cannot make that change. Because there's no cure for autism. If your child has autism, they're going to have autism for life.
For life.
It does not mean that that child cannot be successful. They can be an engineer, they can be a doctor, they can be a politician, they can be a teacher, they can do whatever he or she wants. But they cannot change the diagnosis of autism.
And it doesn't have to be a
Because
terrible thing.
there's no cure for
You
it.
just know you have knowledge about
Exactly.
yourself and how you learn and how you interact with the world, and then you make accommodations so that you understand yourself better. That's to me, like, it's not. When I look at Matthew, I don't see like a kid with deficits. I see like this wonderful little
You
boy
just
that
see
like,
him.
sees things from different perspectives and like makes me look at things differently. And I hope that he is given the opportunity to share that with other people because it's a beautiful thing.
And
Yeah.
please, parents, please, whatever you do, if your child has a disability, have a developmentally appropriate conversation with your child about that disability. So if I have limited vision, I need to know that, I need to wear my glasses all the time. I might not need them for reading, but for distance. So think about how you're going to have that conversation, because you don't want your child to not understand his or her learning style, whether or not they have a disability. And then at a certain age, and at any age, a child has a right to be at his or her IEP team meeting at any age. But there's going to come a point where your child must be at the meeting starting at 14. They call that the transition piece. Because eventually, if your child is 18 and still in school, he or she is going to have sign-over rights unless, because of a court order, you're going to keep those rights. So just think about how you can have a developmentally appropriate conversation, and just, and then ask your child, how do you feel about math? How do you feel about reading? How do you feel about this and that? And bring that information to the IEP team meeting and turn it into an advocacy for what your child needs, and talk to your child about it.
And that can be, it can seem very scary, but that can actually be such a beautiful moment. Because I just did this with Matthew, and I was really afraid about it, because once we got the diagnosis, I'm struggling with it, I'm worried about it, I'm all up in my own feelings. And then I started thinking, I'm like, he's now in 6th grade. He's old enough to know.
So the self-awareness is going to be there.
And I sat down with him, and I was like, it was almost like the big sex talk. It's like, here's another thing you need to know about yourself. And it was such a beautiful thing, because I said, baby, what do you think about this? Like, how does this make you feel? And he shocked me. He's like, Mommy, I feel relieved. It's like I understand why I'm different, or I think different, or I feel different. And it just unlocked something. So like a conversation I felt like I was hurting him, he was like empowered by it. It's like I get it. Like this and so like I would just encourage like other parents like not to feel like that's like I have to do everything for them. Like this is their lives, And I was so touched by what you were saying too about how we were all kind of talking about our perspective being so important too. And I just wanted to kind of underscore this. I always view like everybody's so focused on graduation day. I always say it's like you ever meet a young girl who's like all excited to be engaged because she's so excited about her wedding day, but she forgets, oh my gosh, it's a marriage. You're married after that. It's true.
It's true.
It's not just
I'm gonna go wedding shopping, and then you're like,
it's gonna be the perfect day, and then oh my god, I married a jerk. Right? That happens too. That happens too. I'm just saying, like parents are different, and that's why our perspective is so important, right? Educators, I feel like, are in it for the wedding day, and the wedding day is important. But parents, we're here for the marriage.
Yes.
Like
That's it.
we are
That's
here
right.
because
That's great.
the wedding day is lovely, but we're gonna be here forever. And this is like, we're so invested because we know what the consequences are if they're wonderful or if they're terrible. So I feel like bringing Matthew into that is like it's part of their development. It's like this is who you are. Let's understand together. I'm here to help you instead of trying to shield him from something and then like, what is he gonna find out when he's 17? Like, oh, this is something we don't talk about. Like, that's not, and frankly, I think we need their input too, like, because they can tell us
say the
directly.
same thing all the time because we take them out of the equation all the time. And this is one thing, and I'm glad that you pointed out the fact that we have to see our kids pass beyond the label, right?
Yes.
And then I remember when I started Autism Spread, one of my biggest thing is that my child is not your like textbook, criteria of how he falls under the spectrum. And I think that for me, when I woke up as a parent was when I was staying up at night and just researching autism and this and reading all these books, and I'm like, okay, I kept forgetting my son was still my son. He's Jameer. He's very active. He loves to dance. I mean, you can probably honestly, the schools could teach him better if they teach him through music, because he loves music. You'll probably get him to do a math problem with a rap song. You know what I mean?
You can do that. Some teachers do that.
And you can do that. And then, he learns differently. But I had to sit back and really understand my child for who he was and what that disability meant for him, not what was on paper. And so I think that the most important part in this conversation is one, identifying your child and who your child is, what their unique ability is and what they bring to the table, and understanding that your child should be leading the conversation on what services work for him or her through the work that we do by asking questions, observing our own child, and knowing that we are an expert too, that we don't need the MD behind our last name for someone to understand that we're equal partners. We don't want to fight with you. We don't want to debate with you. We want to be seen as your partners. We want to be your allies. We want to help you make sure that when you do provide a service, that this service is adequate, it's going to work for my child. You know what I mean? And what does that really look like? Because I think that we get lost in the translation of what work doesn't work, and then we continue to do all these trials and tribulations. The next thing you know, a whole school year passes by, and my child didn't make it.
Yeah, you can't go back and get a refund for 4th grade if what you tried didn't work out.
Exactly. And just because you want to continue to be like, well, let's try this, let's try that. How much more trying do we need to do before saying this doesn't work?
And you have to educate, you are your child's first teacher. And as your child's first teacher, you have to educate the school district about your child. And I like that song, India Ari, I Am Not My Hair. Your child is not his or her disability.
Yes.
It's one part of who they are. And so, there's a book called The Gift of Dyslexia, and then there's another book called 10 Things I Wish Every Teacher Would Know About Autism, written by a parent. That your child, look at your child's disability as a strength, it's a difference. It's not, I think of the word disability, what is the ability?
Yep.
What is the ability? Because that word is there and it's bigger than the disability.
Yeah.
So, let your child know. Your child, there's so many successful people who have disabilities. So it is just one part. There's this thing called the disability spread, because when your child is labeled, we start using terms like, oh, he's a special needs kid, instead of a child with a disability. They're not a SPED kid, they're not, a special needs child. They are a child first, and they have a disability. So, celebrate your child, have your child celebrate who he or she is, and have them to be front and center in terms of, what they think their strengths are, what their interests are. And it's okay for those interests to be, and it's important, not okay, but important, for those interests to be included in the instructional methodology that's being used in the classroom. So if they like music, yes, they can learn math through raps, because that's something that teachers do. It's called differentiating instruction. And a lot of kids fall in that category. So it's very, very important to make sure that your child does not see him or herself as a label. And if you hear other people using those terms, say, excuse me, please don't call my child a sped kid, please don't call my child a special need. His name is Tony or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're gonna have to educate the school district about your child, so that stigmatization and that discrimination is not something that you're constantly confronted with.
I'm just thinking about one other example. I'm like, feel
That's
like
all
my
right,
mom
go
is
ahead.
so no.
We're doing it. This conversation has to happen.
You know, the things that Matthew enjoys, like art. I was breaking in a brand new special ed teacher who I found out.
She's like breaking her in.
I heard it. She, you know, brand new, full of love and light, but she calls me and she's like, I got a problem with Matthew. You know, every single time, like I'm trying to, you know, give him a math lesson or lay lesson or whatever, you know, in the classroom, you know, he's drawing and he's sitting there sketching and it's very disrespectful. And I keep telling him, like, give him time, you know, for his art and stuff like that. Clearly had not read the part in the IEP where, you know, Matt has gone to art therapy when he loses focus, like him even just drawing a line or drawing a circle, like he may not be looking directly at her, but he can access the information if he is like, and it's just like you again, you have to know, you know, your IEP, you have to remain vigilant, and don't be afraid to push back for your kids. I said, you know, well, you know, are you trained in art therapy? Like that's what made me start asking questions where I was again a teachable moment where it's like, let me find out a little bit about like her areas of expertise here, because are you not familiar with that as a strategy for him to be able to access the information? You're just like,
Well, it's common sense. So if a child is obsessed, because we know sometimes our children are obsessed and they have autism with dinosaurs, you say to the child, well, you know, how would Tyrannosaurus Rex solve that math problem?
yeah.
But
You know?
simple as that.
And so it's a
Simple as
little
that.
thing.
But
It's,
how
you know,
the problem
sometimes
compounds is that like it was becoming like a disciplinary issue because this woman took it as your child is disrespecting me.
My instruction.
Yeah, my instruction time, and this is disrespectful. Like she was taking like one of his behaviors as like a personal, it's like, and so you gotta watch because our kids, like, if our kid, even in a special ed setting where we know like this is a behavior, typical, you know, misdiagnosis, like they're gonna look for an opportunity to say like this is abnormal behavior, we're gonna discipline. It almost got there, but you gotta jump on top of it.
it's supposed to be personalized, individualized learning, which means if an IEP, individualized education program, it's not a plan, it's a program. So that means it's a set of services and supports. And so personalizing it, and the way that you do it is you take that child's interest. If it's music, maybe those headphones can have a little, you know, streaming classical music or whatever for that child while they're doing their math or whatever content area. So that's the piece. It's supposed to be personalized and it's supposed to be for the child. So it's not what the teacher, you know, feels comfortable with or does it on a routine basis. It's coming out of, you know, your comfort zone in terms of your instructional routines and saying, this is what this child needs. You know, if I go to a car dealer and I say, I want 20-inch rims on my new whatever, you know, that's what I get. I want personalized service, and IEP is personalized.
Well, I feel like this was a great therapy session.
I know. We need venting sessions. That's all.
And then
Exactly.
it did me dirty like that.
And then the law says, regulations.
It's so true. So with that being said, guys, it's already a little, you know, it's 4 o'clock, a little after 4 o'clock.
I think we're
We're sinking. Goodbye. We're sinking in the ship. So, all right, guys, here we go.
That was very dramatic.
But
didn't mean to end like that.
so, all right, guys, it's a little after 4. We appreciate your time. This is one of many conversations that Autism Sprinter is going to bring forward. I know that we're going to have another conversation in Lawrence, and we're going to have this conversation in Spanish. Because, you know, that's another community who can benefit from this conversation and talking about marginalized communities and what does it look like to navigate special education and disabilities in color. So thank you for watching. I'm gonna close out with everyone saying their name, so that you guys know who these women are, and make sure you follow them. And I encourage you to learn more about the experts here, because we are experts. I know I like to classify myself as a parent expert because I birthed Jameer, and he is my child, and nobody can tell me about my child what I don't already know, or what I can help you so that you can help my child. So, all right, Dehada Lopez, founder of Autism Sprinter. See you guys later.
Edith Bazil, educator.
Carrie Rodriguez, Matthew Miles and David's mom, founder of Massachusetts Parents United.
And Tiffany Payne, just a mom of 5, and you can always reach out if you have any questions about homelessness or even with, disability in general.
All right, guys. See you
Thank you,
later.
guys.
Right.
It's been a
Just a mom
pleasure.
of 5.